Hello, this is Karie Bible, tour guide at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And this is week 8, believe it or not, of Tour Talk. So I always hope these things are actually working when I hit the button. So if you want to just say hello or something to let me know you're here and you can see me and hear me and stuff, that would be great. I was thinking one thing this week. One of the things that has been such a gift in doing my cemetery tour and the two books I've worked on and the film history stuff that I do is that I've met people from all over the world. And it's just so beautiful that you can come from a totally different country, different culture, different language, different everything, but the love of movies immediately bonds you and you become friends. And I think that is so beautiful. And I've just had so many wonderful people come into my life as a result of doing the work I do. And I couldn't be more grateful. My latest new friend from Germany, Benjamin. Hi, Benjamin. The other day, he sent me a little care packet. It was so sweet. And a Marlene Dietrich card, a Louise Brooks card and pen, and a book from the German film exhibition. So it just cheered me up to get that, and it was awesome. So again, I'm so grateful to all the friends and people that I have met through our love of film, and I'm just, I'm just awed and grateful for all of you. So this week we have a lot to discuss, but I want to get down to the most important thing first that many of you are probably wondering about. That's, of course, close up. This week, one of Close Up's most cherished and longed for dreams finally came to fruition. I went to the cemetery one day for a brief visit to just say hello to him, spend a little time with him, and I pulled out the big jar of Temptations treats, and it finally happened. My hand slipped, the treats spilled out everywhere, and as I scrambled to collect them, Close Up just went to town and had a huge buffet of Temptations treats. I think he's been hoping this would happen for a very, very long time, and it finally did. So Close Up was beyond delighted at getting that many Temptations treats. He was very, very happy about that. So this week, it is Pride Weekend, and I wanted to do a special fashion episode. I have always loved fashion, and I think that a lot of times when the general public sees a movie, people think about the movie stars or the director, but there are so many artists and craftspeople that go into making a movie who really seldom get the recognition they deserve. And there's so many different departments, and movie making really is a massive collaboration from so many people in so many areas. And the main person that I wanted to talk about today is one of my favorites, fashion designer Adrian. He was born in Connecticut in 1903, and he was originally named Adrian Adolph Greenberg. Of course, that's not exactly the most fashion-friendly combination of names, so eventually he changed it to Gilbert Adrian, and then just Adrian. Which Adrian, a lot of designers in the very earliest years had glamorous one-named monikers like Erte or Kellogg. So the one name thing is definitely not just a new concept. So Adrian studied under Kellogg, and he wound up going to a School of the Arts in New York City and then studied fashion design in Paris. While in Paris, he was discovered by Irving Berlin and brought back to New York to design for a show. And then Adrian was discovered by Natasha Rambova, Rudolph Valentino's second wife. I love how many interconnections there are with a lot of the residents at Hollywood Forever, because so many of them knew each other or worked together or collaborated or had personal relationships. It's kind of endless. Well, at any rate, Natasha saw Adrian as designs and was very impressed by them. And by the way, Adrian was sort of born to be a designer. His mom and dad were both in the millinery industry. Both were extremely artistic. Adrian was a prodigious artist from a very early age. Even as a little boy, he would do tons of sketches and drawings, and he just cranked them out too. He was so incredibly prolific. Well, in any case, Natasha Rambova hired Adrian to do some costumes for she and Valentino. And he worked on a project called The Hooded Falcon, which did not come to fruition. He worked with them on another film, but his first fully realized film with them was The Cobra from about, I think, 1925. And Adrian came out to Hollywood. In Hollywood, Adrian also was asked to design the costumes for the prologue for Charlie Chaplin's The Gold Rush. If you've been to the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, they used to have a giant stage down front, and they would do these huge, elaborate prologues before a movie that had singing and dancing and all sorts of spectacle. And Adrian was asked to design the costumes for the Gold Rush, Charlie Chaplin's Gold Rush, for the show that went before, the prologue that went before. He did this, and all of Hollywood was in attendance. Everybody who was anybody was at the Egyptian Theater that night to see the premiere of The Gold Rush, and of course, hence, see Adrian's incredible designs. And of course, it was obvious that somebody in that audience was going to be dazzled by what they saw, if not everybody, and give Adrian another job, which that's exactly what happened. Cecil B. DeMille, another Hollywood Forever resident, saw the costumes that night and very wisely hired Adrian to work with him. So Adrian worked with Cecil B. DeMille, and then Adrian started at MGM in 1928. He would be at MGM from 1928 until about 1942, and he was the head of costume design. And I just love his work so much. I mean, he worked on over 250 films, which is huge. He churned out anywhere from 50 to 75 hand sketches per day. Some designers had other people do their sketches. Adrian did his own. And he was very insistent on the highest quality materials, the highest quality silks, sequins, everything. And he designed the costumes from all the way to the biggest stars to the tiniest extras and bit players. So Adrian was extremely hands-on from every single costume from inception through completion. And also, he was able to adjust his style. He could do something really spectacular and outrageous, like the 1930 classic Madame Satan by Cecil B. DeMille, which has nothing to do with Satanism, by the way, but it's a spectacular fashion movie with the most outrageous costumes you will ever see. It's glorious. He designed all of the costumes for that. They're so avant-garde and amazing. And also, that was shot by Harold Rawson, another Hollywood Forever resident. In any case, he designed a lot of costumes, too, for just average women, because he felt that costumes, in addition to reflecting spectacular and fantasy, they should also reflect realism. So a lot of the clothes worn by Joan Crawford when she did many of the working girl type films in the 30s, where she would be the working girl who was eventually transformed into the glamorous socialite. And Adrian's costumes were so highly praised that a lot of designers were said to have gone to theaters and sat in there and tried to sketch in the dark so they could see his designs and get inspiration. Of course, in 1932, there was a very famous Joan Crawford movie called Letty Linton. I've seen a bootleg copy, don't tell anybody, but Letty Linton is considered one of the most iconic fashion movies ever made, and it's a shame, due to a rights issue, it has basically never been available since the early 30s, and it may never be available since the early 30s. Long story there, but in any case, Letty Linton, he basically looked at Joan Crawford and he said she had shoulders like Tarzan, like Johnny Weissmuller. So instead of, he couldn't cut off her shoulders, so instead he would accentuate her shoulders. So he designed this gown in Letty Linton that had these gigantic, huge ruffled sleeves, which the fabric on the sleeves bounced the light right into Joan Crawford's cheekbones. And it completely narrowed her torso, and it was very flattering. This dress was so popular, it inspired 500,000 copies. So Adrian truly was setting the tone for fashion all over the world. I mean, these movies were consumed everywhere and adored by people. I certainly would have been in the audience oohing and ahhing over Adrian gowns in the 30s. In fact, I do that even today. So he designed for it Joan Crawford, Greta Garbo, Norma Shearer, Jean Harlow. One of his, sorry, my allergies are so bad today. One of Adrian's major gifts was hiding a woman's flaws and accentuating her assets. And again, he truly was a genius at doing exactly that. Another of Adrian's famous movies is The Wizard of Oz. He designed all of the costumes for that film, including the ruby red slippers. And his other signature movie, also from 1939, is The Women, which has stars Rosalind Russell, Joan Crawford, and Norma Shearer. And the movie features a Technicolor fashion sequence. So if you really want to see Adrian gowns at their absolute finest, The Women is such a great film. It's one of my favorites. I've probably seen that movie 20 times, and I never get tired of it. And again, Adrian was a trendsetter, and he truly was a legendary costume designer. Well, as the 1930s came to an end and the 1940s dawned, America changed pretty radically. And by the way, I do want to put in a plug for my friend and colleague, Kimberly Truler. She runs a blog called Glam Amour, and she's also doing virtual internet lectures. I've learned a ton from going to her lectures over the years, and she is a fashion expert, film history expert. Learned a lot from Kimberly, so I highly recommend her work. In any case, Kimberly always points out that fashion and anything in the world doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's a response to everything in the world around it. And as World War II happened and Pearl Harbor was bombed, things changed a lot in America. And glamour was toned down, fashion was changing, a lot of things were changing. And in the early 1940s, MGM decided to kind of change Greta Garbo's image. Because for years, Adrian had designed extraordinarily lavish gowns for Garbo for films like Mata Hari or Anna Christie or Camille. Well, in the early, I think about 41, they put Garbo in a film called Two-Faced Woman. And it was a disaster. It was a terrible movie. The final film for Greta Garbo. And Adrian was so unhappy about the deglamorization of Garbo and the attempt to shift her exotic foreign image that he actually said, when the glamour ends for Garbo, it ends for me as well. And he quit MGM, which that's a huge loss given his incredible talent and artistry. So Adrian, instead of really returning to a movie studio, Adrian set up a couture boutique. He ran these boutiques. He had one in Beverly Hills and one in New York City. He ran these from 1944 until 1952. And given his prominence in the movies, women flocked for Adrian design. So he was at no shortage of work. He did couture fashion for women and also had an off-the-rack label as well. And Adrian had a line of shoes, a line of perfume. There was an Adrian pattern line. Today, you might say Adrian was branding, quote unquote, but he was branding long before that became a popular term in our lexicon. He truly was an incredible entrepreneur. And I used to model in fashion shows at the Santa Monica Convention Center here in Los Angeles many years ago. And I was lucky enough to get to model an Adrian gown. And you know what struck me about doing that is when I looked inside the dress, there were hooks and eyes and ribbons and straps and all this stuff. And the genius of this actually was, first off, the way the hooks and straps and belts and all the things inside the dress. First off, they kind of keep your stomach flat. And also they drape over every curve and every part of your body so perfectly, and they stay in place. And as I got to wear that dress in the show, I remember thinking, this man is not just an artist, he was an engineer. And he really understood the female form and the exact right way to flatter it. So I have to say, it was incredibly impressive, almost bordering on a religious experience, to get to have an Adrian gown on my body. That was really cool. And Adrian was married to actress Janet Gaynor. She was the very first actress to ever win the Best Actress Academy Award. She married Adrian, and not too long afterward, Janet retired from the screen. But Janet was an astute businesswoman and was very involved with Adrian's business. And he retired, and he was about, let's see, I'm trying to remember the year, but he retired, I think, in 1952. And for the next 7 years, he and Janet lived part of the year in Brazil, where Adrian painted, he collected art, they traveled. And sadly, Adrian died in 1959 of a massive heart attack at the age of 56 years old, which is incredibly young. And Adrian and Janet Gaynor are interred side by side at Hollywood Forever. And Adrian is still considered, even among costume designers in Hollywood today, to be one of the greatest and most influential of all time. And after I end my talk, I'm going to post a bunch of pictures about Adrian, a website about Adrian. So if you want to learn more, there's plenty of content out there. And I will also be posting the book about Adrian by historian Mark Vieira that I highly recommend ordering if you can from Larry Edmonds, because they do have it in stock. So I definitely encourage you, again, to see these movies and see the artistry of his clothes and how well they complemented set designer Cedric Gibbons, how well they suited each actress and their personality. Next up, we're going to talk about another famous fashionista at Hollywood Forever, and that is Mr. Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell had a fascinating life, and if you want to learn more about that life, there's a book called From Rags to Bitches that he wrote about his incredible experience from childhood all the way to becoming a fashion icon. Also, Mr. Blackwell was a fashion designer, but he found his greatest fame in life as a fashion critic. And every year he would issue these scathing statements, even poems, about the way famous ladies dressed. Cher was a particularly favorite target of Mr. Blackwell's brand of ire. And a lot of times, some women really wanted to be on the worst dress list, but most of them did not. It was not nice to be kind of publicly called out for your clothing by Mr. Blackwell. And he ran a fashion design empire with his partner of 59 years, Robert L. Spencer, and they are interred together at Hollywood Forever. And long before Joan Rivers, Mr. Blackwell really gets the credit as the world's very first acid-tongued red carpet fashion critic. Now, I do want to say, though, that while he was heralded and people enjoyed kind of his bitchy critical fashion comments at the time, most of the targets of his criticism were women. And Joan Rivers kind of carried that tradition, but I've noticed that when Joan Rivers passed away, that trend really stopped. And in the last few years on the red carpet, there's been more of a trend of asking women about their lives, about their activism, about their artistry, their work. And just, I mean, sure, people still want to know what they're wearing, but I think the criticizing them and laughing at them and making fun of their outfits and stuff has really kind of gone out of fashion. But Mr. Blackwell is still an interesting character from Hollywood history. And also, if you want to see any of his clothes, occasionally they do crop up on eBay or Etsy for sale. I used to think it'd be really cool to do the tour in a Mr. Blackwell dress, but they were so outside my size and my price range, except the micro minis, which I don't really think it would be classy to do the tour in a micro mini dress, or even possible for that matter. And I do want to say sometimes, rarely, even Adrian outfits crop up in vintage stores or on eBay or Etsy, so you can also kind of keep a lookout for that. But again, I'll post more content about Mr. Blackwell because he really was funny and incredibly entertaining. Also, one of the employees, Noelle, at the cemetery told me that when Mr. Blackwell was making his final arrangement, she found out he was coming to meet with her about it, and she called up a friend and borrowed an entire Prada ensemble for Mr. Blackwell's meeting with her. And he noticed that and complimented her attire. So I thought that was awesome that she kind of wanted to pay tribute to Mr. Blackwell and be well dressed for the occasion, and that's a great story. And the third fashion star I would like to talk about today is maybe someone you haven't heard about, but also they're very prominent, and that's Bill Hargate. I first heard about Bill Hargate because even when I was like a teenager, I liked to read Vogue and Vanity Fair and the fashion magazines, even though there's no way I could afford those clothes. Even today, I can't afford them. But it was fun to look and fun to read about them and see what was trending and what people were wearing, etc. And I first saw Bill Hargate's clothes when I was in high school because he designed this ice blue gown column dress that Gina Davis wore in 1989, I remember that, when she won Best Supporting Actress for The Accidental Tourist. He also designed this very controversial, much criticized gown that Gina Davis wore the year she was nominated for Thelma and Louise. And both designs were from Bill Hargate. Bill Hargate started out on the stage, eventually worked on Broadway productions of Oklahoma and I think Peter Pan. And then, of course, inevitably wound up in Hollywood. And his biggest show in Hollywood probably was Murphy Brown. He designed all of the clothes for Candice Bergen, or selected them and or designed them for her, and really kind of defined and even redefined the way working women in the 90s dressed. And he won 4 Emmy Awards for his television designs. And he dressed a variety of movie and television stars off screen as well as on, including Gina Davis, Kim Basinger, and designing women's star Annie Potts. And he also won the Costume Designers Guild Award for Life Achievement in 2001. Mr. Hargate died in 2003 at the age of 68 years old. And I'll post some articles about this after the tour is over. He's in a little fountain and columbarium area that's outdoors a little ways behind Griffith J. Griffith at Hollywood Forever. So Bill Hargate is not as well known, but I think still very interesting and very talented as a fashion designer. So those are the 3 fashion mavens or fashion designers I wanted to talk about on the show this week. And I'd love to hear from you. One of the fun parts about doing this has been interacting with many people. And I know some of you have already sent me some names you'd like me to talk about in the future. So if you have more suggestions or more names you'd like to send me, please keep sending those in, and I would definitely love to see them. And I'll do a separate episode about Janet Gaynor, Adrian's wife, because she kind of warrants a standalone episode as well. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, for watching, and also I did want to mention I am starting to do tours again, slowly but surely, and I'm starting to do private ones in the month of June. Fingers crossed by July I'll be able to get back to my public tour schedule. As I've mentioned before, I have to do social distancing on the tours. Everybody has to wear a mask. I know it's hot outside and that's not easy to do, but we have to. And if you want to book a private tour, definitely you can contact me on Facebook, or better yet, my cell phone and my email address are both to be found at cemeterytour.com. And social distancing rules will apply, of course, and I'm trying to keep it to 10 people or less just to keep small groups for now. And that's pretty much today's episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. From myself and Little Close Up, I'd like to say thank you, and I will see you next week.